Welcome to Seekers and Shifters, where we talk to the world's foremost experts in personal growth and development and ask them everything we really want to know. Hey there, Seekers and Shifters. It's your host, Michelle, and I'm so excited today to be here with Dr. Larry Farwell. Dr. Larry, will you introduce yourself?
Yes. Well, as you said, I'm Dr. Larry Farwell. I'm a neuroscientist and author. I wrote a book. It's actually become a #1 best-selling book called The Science of Creating Miracles, Neuroscience, Quantum Physics, and Living the Life of Your Dreams. And that's what it's about.
And I'm so excited to dive into this with you today because so often, and the folks who are listening to this who are kind of getting into the woo, sometimes we feel sheepish because people will come at us and say, well, that's not science, or that's just bullshit, or that's just made up mystical crap, you and your crystals and your stupid rocks. And what you've done is actually start to prove some of the scientific theory behind some of these experiences, right?
Yes. Well, I'm a neuroscientist, and I've spent my life studying the brain. I've invented some things. I invented the first brain-computer interface, which allows you to communicate directly from a brain to a computer, so a paralyzed person can talk through a computer and speech synthesizer. And now there are probably 1,000 labs around the world doing that, but the first one was the one that I developed. And I invented brain fingerprinting, which is a technique to detect concealed information stored in the brain. So I do a lot of work with investigations, counterterrorism, FBI, CIA, their counterparts overseas. So I have quite a history as far as the things I've done in the neuroscience realm that have practical applications. And I've also collaborated with my father, who's a renowned physicist, Professor George Farwell, to do quantum physics research on the brain and the interaction between human beings and the quantum mechanical world. And the word quantum, it's used to mean all kinds of things. However, when I speak about quantum physics, I'm actually talking about research that we do with standard quantum physics apparatus in the laboratory. And I'll get into that in a few minutes. However, yes, I have brought some scientific perspective to the phenomenon.
I want to get as deep into quantum physics as you think our brains can comprehend here with our myself and our audience. I feel like every time I read about quantum physics, it feels a little bit like my brain is melting out of my ears. You know, I'm maybe understanding 10% of what I'm reading, but I try. But what's been so interesting to me in my rudimentary understanding is this concept that the outcome shifts based on the observer. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, it is well known in quantum physics that how we observe a quantum mechanical process in a very real sense creates what we see. And some of the early research was with the double slit experiment you might have heard of, where you observe in one way, you observe in such ways, see particles, you see particles. You observe in such ways, see waves, you'll see waves with the exact same experimental design. Now, what my dad and I did is to take that further to show that we can actually choose among these infinite possibilities as to what is going to take place in the physical world. And going back to how this began, I was eating lunch with my dad, and we were in a restaurant. And I said, hey, Dad, anything is possible. And this is something I've done a lot of research on. He said, yes, son, any imaginable configuration of quantum particle wave phenomena is possible. Some are probable, some are improbable, some are extremely improbable, but anything's possible. And I said, okay, so it's possible that all of the elementary particles that make up my body and yours, plus enough air to breathe, will tunnel from here to the other side of the moon, and we'll carry on this conversation there. He said, well, actually, yeah, that's correct. And in fact, and he got out a paper and napkin and he wrote out a formula and he calculated the approximate probability that was going to happen. Now, spoiler alert, it actually was a low probability. It didn't happen. We stayed in the restaurant. But the point is that even some impossible sounding thing like that, like flying the other side to the moon instantaneously. And by the way, tunneling is a known phenomenon in quantum mechanics. It actually happens. You can measure it in the laboratory. But even such an impossible sounding thing like that has some probability of happening. And the question then becomes, can we create improbable events? I mean, miracles, it used to be thought miracles were impossible events that somehow happened. But in the quantum mechanical world, anything is possible. So the question becomes, can we create highly improbable events? I mean, you've all had the experience. I think you have. I'm sure many of your viewers have had the experience. I'd like to hear from Joe. I'm thinking about Joe, or thinking about Sally. Just then the phone rings and it's Sally. So perhaps we created that somehow, but we don't know the probability that's going to happen. So it's not a scientific experiment. We do know the probability of alpha particle emission by plutonium. That's a quantum mechanical process. And we understand the probability distribution of that very clearly. So we decided to say, well, okay, let's see if we can use our consciousness to create an improbable event, to create a miracle. And all of the great spiritual teachers have said that, and a lot of people who are experts on how to be successful in life, said the way we generate our lives is we create a resonance on the level of our consciousness, and that moves what we now call the conscious unified field of quantum mechanics, which is the fundamental reality. The fundamental reality of the universe is the same as the fundamental reality of you and me. That's on the level of our consciousness. We can contact that. So we create a resonance on the level of our consciousness, which moves nature or moves the conscious unified field in that resonance, and then that shows up in our lives. But wise people have said that for 10,000 years or more. It's like you pluck a string on a guitar, it sets up a resonance that resonates with other instruments in the environment with a similar resonance, and then you have a whole symphony. Well, I guess guitars aren't a symphony, but you have resonance, you have harmony. Now, so we decided to see if we could test that phenomenon in the laboratory. From the level of our consciousness, creating a resonance, an impulse, and then see if we could shift quantum mechanical events. If we could create an extremely improbable quantum mechanical event, which means create a miracle. So we set up an experimental apparatus to test that, and we found that we could. We could found, especially people who had highly developed level of consciousness, we could create extremely improbable events. Now, I don't think many people wake up in the morning and think, oh boy, today, I'd really like to use my consciousness to shift the probability distribution of alpha particle emission by plutonium. However, people do wake up in the morning and think, I would really like to have a miraculous career. I'd really like to make a miraculous difference in the world. I'd like to have a miraculous relationship. I would like to have something highly improbable take place in my life that allows me to fully express my gifts and contribute to other people and make a difference in the world and have fun. Well, that is the same mechanics. Tune into your consciousness within, set up a resonance on that level, and that is created in your lives. That's what we proved in the scientific laboratory. So my first take-home message is all of those impossible things that other people say are impossible in your life, but that you truly desire, your wildest, greatest, wonderful dreams, those are in fact possible, and you can create them from the level of your consciousness.
It's such a beautiful concept. Can you tell us what miracles have you created in your life using this process?
Well, sure. I'll tell you a couple. One, that's not what I'm usually asked, but I'm delighted to do that. When I was a grad student, I invented brain fingerprinting, which is a technique to detect concealed information stored in the brain. So you can tell who the serial killers are. You can tell who the terrorists are by detecting this concealed information stored in their brain. So I naively thought, okay, I'm going to leave grad school. I graduated from Harvard, and then I was at University of Illinois getting my PhD. When I leave grad school, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to meet with the CIA, and I'm going to get $1 million contract to implement this brain fingerprinting invention I had. And my friends and colleagues who knew way more about it than I did said, well, okay, how likely is that to happen? How many people have ever, at that time I was a grad student, I didn't have my patents, which I later got, I didn't have my PhD, I didn't have a lab, I didn't have anything, but I did have this invention that I knew it worked. I tested it in the laboratory there at the university. So I said, how many people have gotten $1 million contract with the CIA or any government agencies when all they had is a bright idea? They didn't have a lab, they didn't have patents. They didn't have an institution back in the day. They just had a bright idea. How many have gotten a $1,000 contract, let alone $1 million contract, who have just what you have? And furthermore, you're committing professional suicide. You leave grad school, you'll never get your PhD. It's just your life, your professional life is over. But I knew on the level of my consciousness, I had this quiet knowing that I had this invention. It was real. I could prove it. So I ignored the advice of my more knowledgeable friends. And I went to Washington, D.C. I met with the CIA. I said, hey, I've got this invention. You've been spending millions of dollars, people trying to do stuff like this. I've actually done it. I can prove it. And they said, okay. And I got $1 million contract with the CIA. So that was a highly improbable event. A highly improbable event. In the scientific terms, that's a miracle. Another time where I experienced both sides of the coin of we create our external life and our circumstances from within. I have been doing a lot of counterterrorism work in the Middle East. And I remember one time, I spent a lot of time over there, and one time it seemed almost normal. I remember meeting with a government official at his home. We took a walk through the neighborhood. We went to this restaurant, outdoor restaurant, and we had dinner, and life seemed pretty normal. I'd been training people in my brain fingerprinting. I'd been doing these tests, detecting terrorist masterminds. Everything seemed sort of fine. And then several things happened which were not normal and which got to me. And one of them was that another government official who was up against the same terrorist that I was, took a walk the same neighborhood. He was kidnapped and tortured and murdered. They went to that same restaurant where I routinely ate dinner and gunned down a bunch of people. A whole lot of people died. I wasn't there at the time, but I could have been. And my best friend and second in command, who was former chief of counterterrorism for the FBI, was also killed. So that really gave me a sense of dread about the whole phenomenon. I was back in the U.S., and I was organizing to go back to the Middle East and do another program training people to use my invention. And nothing was going right. The government agencies that owed me money weren't paying me the money. None of the organizations who were working, nothing was working. And so I took a look at myself. I had a talk with myself similar to what I have with my clients inside Creating Miracles. I said, okay, what's going on here? Well, clearly my inner state was creating my outer reality. And I was afraid. I have a black belt in Kung Fu. I like to think of myself as this courageous guy. I do all this counterterrorism work, but I, being realistic, I had to realize I was afraid. I was afraid of torture. I was afraid of being killed. I was more afraid of torture, actually, than dying. I was afraid of leaving my daughter without a father. I was afraid, and that fear was resonating, and that was what I was putting out into the universe, and that was what was coming up in my life. So what I did is what I have trained a lot of my clients in Science Creating Miracles do. I tuned into, all right, what is the reality here? Well, I can go over there and save other people's lives. I've done that many times before. Well, my life can be one of the ones that gets saved. I can create a resonance on the level of my consciousness of being able to create safety for myself, to create harmony, to create success in this whole endeavor. I can go over there and do my work, do my research, train my people, and come back safe and sound with my whole entourage, everybody with me. Now, I had been able to think that, and I knew all along that that's what I want to do. What I did was I was able to, through using these techniques of Science Creating Miracles, to tune into that level of myself where you're 100% safe, 100% powerful, 100% valuable. The true me, the me that's in contact with that unbounded inner source of life. And from that level, I had that desire, that impulse. And then that's what radiated out, and that's what was created in my life. So that was miraculous. And then I went over. One more thing, and I can have fun doing it. I wanted to add that into the equation because that's important. So that's what then I created in my life. That's what happened. I went over there. I did all my work. I detected the terrorist masterminds. I trained other people in my invention. And I had fun doing it and came back safe and sound. So that's a matter where at first my inner state was creating the opposite of what I really wanted. And when I tune into the reality is we're 100% safe, powerful, and valuable. We tune into that level of ourselves, radiate from that level, and that's what we create in our life. So I've had that experience in my own.
I love it. And the idea being that we're constantly creating one way or the other. It's just sometimes it's for most of us, most of the time, it's an unconscious creation. And sometimes we're able to tune in and be consciously creating. There are people who would find this concept offensive and say, look, are you saying that anything that happens that's bad in my life or external circumstances is my creation? And then they might even get caught into a loop of, well, bad things happen, so I'm in a negative state. So now more bad things happen, I'm in a more negative state. How do you address that?
Well, when we first start out in life, it looks like everything that happens to us rather than for us. And one thing I discovered is people would do things that I'd say, okay, the problem here is that these bad people did these bad things and there was a bad outcome and it affected them. And what I discovered over time is the villains whose fault it was kept changing. But the circumstances, the events I'd go through, it was like the same play with different actors. And so as a scientist, all right, what is the common denominator here? Oh, well, the common denominator is myself. And so now that realization can actually be enlightening. It can also be sort of depressing. It's like, oh, I'm causing all this bad stuff in my life. And the thing is that, yes, what happens in our life resonates with something in ourselves, but we can't control the circumstances. We can't control what's taking place. What we can control, what we have command over, is how we respond to that. And in order to create a shift in that, a transmutation in that, I want to talk a little bit about how the nervous system works, how we learn. So you're crawling around on the floor. You're 2 years old. You touch the floor. You touch the wall. You touch the table leg. There's not much to notice. Not much happens. However, you touch the hot stove, and now you have an aha experience. Now there's something important going on. There's something I need to learn. There's something I need to incorporate into my understanding of the universe and my response to the environment. So when you have this aha experience, it opens up the brain for reprogramming. Now there's something valuable happening. I have something to learn from. So when that happens, there is a brain response taking place that you can measure in the EEG, in the electrical brain activity, which is called and you won't be tested on this later, called a memory and encoding related multifaceted electroencephalographic response. MER, murmur. These murmur moments open the brain up for reprogram, and that's how we learn. That's how the brain progresses. So how can we take advantage of that? Well, when something comes along that seems to be a threat to us or a detriment to us, usually it seems to be an attack on our value or our power or our safety or some combination thereof. And where did that come from? We carry around within ourselves an inner blueprint that I'm only 75% safe and 64% powerful and 55% valuable, whatever it is, less than 100%. Reality is that who we are is that unbounded consciousness, the conscious unified field that gives rise to the whole universe. And all the wise people have said that, and I'll talk a little bit about that from quantum mechanical perspective in a minute. So what we can do when something comes along that seems to be a threat, when somebody says or does something that seems to be damaging to us, we can react, we can shoot the messenger, we can punish the messenger so they'll never say or do that again, or we can take it internally, oh my gosh, I really am a horrible person after all, or we can use that impetus, that trigger, rather than a trigger for reaction, as a trigger for transmutation, as a trigger for tuning in. First evaluate if it really is a threat. I mean, if the building's on fire, that actually is a threat. You don't want to tune in yourself. You want to get out of the building. But usually when something comes along that triggers us, it's not a real threat. So tune into that level within ourselves, that what does it feel like to be Michelle? What does it feel like to be Dr. Larry? What is that quiet level within myself that I resonate with? What is that conscious level where we're 100% safe, 100% valuable, 100% powerful? On that level, we experience the truth of who we are, and then rather than getting triggered and going off into something that's not going to be useful to us, you tune into who you truly are, and then you enhance, you bring your blueprint more in line with your true blueprint. You start to radiate, oh, well, I'm 100% safe, 100% valuable, 100% powerful, and then that's what we discover more and more in our lives. So you can turn all of those negative experiences upside down rather than being an opportunity to react or fight against somebody else or take it internally. You can use it as an opportunity for transmutation, to develop yourself to a higher level of consciousness.
Yeah, you know, my good friend Mo used to say, if you look left, you'll see what's left. If you look right, you'll see what's right. There's this concept that, like, you know, in your reality that you want to step into is there for you to step into. And now you have the conscious choice of what reality you want to step into, what you want to focus on, what you want to experience. And what you want to experience is what you will experience. It seems simple when you say it like that, but why is it so hard for people to do?
Well, I think it's challenging. I wouldn't say hard, but I say it's challenging because we're used to directing our attention outward. We're used to, the senses draw us outward. Or even to our own thoughts or emotions. We're not used to noticing the self, the I, the subject, our consciousness. And let me geek out for a minute on the quantum mechanics of who we are, because that will help to explain how we can tune into that more easily. In front of me, I have a desk here. You might be able to hear me knocking on it. And it appears to be brown and solid. That's the way it looks to me. That's my experience. However, if you look more scientifically at it, you will see that it's not solid at all. It's mostly empty space. It's molecules moving around very quickly. You look within those, you see atoms moving around quickly. You look within those, you see elementary particles, protons, neutrons, electrons. You look within those, you see quarks. You go down to the string theory level, and it's simply vibrating string. So the physical world, this desk here, is not fundamentally different from the air around it or from my body. It's simply a pattern in the conscious unified field. Einstein coined the term unified field to describe that field of infinite potential that the particle wave phenomena of the universe arise out of. So who we are, the essential constituent of ourself, the I, the subject, is the same as the essential constituent of the universe, conscious unified field. It's actually easy to tune into that, but we're not in the habit of tuning into that. And what happens is that when you're in reactive mode, you're pretty much on autopilot. When you wake up, then you have a choice. And what happens as you more often start to choose to experience your inner reality, that choice becomes easier. We wake up sooner and sooner. Now, we all have experiences where something triggers us and we're just running down a railroad track. We don't really have a choice. But at some moment, we have an aha experience. We have a murmur moment. The memory encoding related multifaceted electroencephalic response. Those murmur moments are an opportunity to wake up and say, oh, okay, what's actually going on here? And how can I tune into the quieter, subtler realities of my life? The intellect shouts, the emotions scream, and the intuition whispers. The more we get attuned to that subtle whisper, the more attuned we are to ourselves and to nature, and the easier it becomes to respond from that more profound, higher level of consciousness level.
What's the best practice for somebody who's just starting to even think about this, to begin to be able to hear that whisper, listen to their intuition?
Okay. Well, a couple of things. Great question. First of all, in my book, I talk a lot about that. The last 20 years, I've developed practices to apply the science of creating miracles experientially. And one thing that's important is that life is an experience. And I could talk about things here, and yet in order to actually create a transmutation in your life, the direct experience is necessary. However, I can talk a little bit about something that we can do on a practical level that I can describe without actually walking through a consciousness level experience. And that is what I was talking about a minute ago of what I call transmutation trigger. And that is when something comes along that triggers you, use it as an opportunity to tune into the quieter levels of yourself. In other words, rather than going into reactive mode, well, first of all, as I said a minute ago, first of all, evaluate the situation. If this really is a threat to your being, if you're really being chased by a bear, then you're not, it's not the time to tune into something subtle. It's the time to act accordingly. However, usually that's not the case when something triggers. Evaluate and then tune into, allow the awareness rather than going outward, rather than getting wrapped up in the emotions or getting wrapped up in analyzing the situation. Allow your awareness to settle down inward to that intuitive level, which it'll do spontaneously because that's enjoyable to do, and get a sense of, okay, what does it feel like to be me? How is this resonating with me? One of the things that's important is in exploring our life, in moving forward in our life, get a sense of what resonates with you and what doesn't. There are certain people, so they walk into the room and you feel uplifted, you feel enlivened, you feel harmonious, you feel love, even before they've said or done anything. Other people, other circumstances, other environments, they have a different effect. Well, one of the things that happens as you evolve is you more and more spontaneously, as you practice tuning into your intuition, you more and more spontaneously go there, and you'll find that different, not only different events, but different people will be attracted into your life. You'll start resonating at a higher level, and some of the people who may have been appropriate for your life in the past might be falling away, and you'll be bringing into your life people at a higher vibration. And that's simply a matter of experience. When you have a murmur moment, of using that as an opportunity to tune into your true self on that quiet, intuitive level. Beyond the intellect shouts, the emotions scream, the intuition whispers. Consciously allowing yourself to tune into that intuitive level. Now, that comes by letting go. It doesn't come by holding on. There are a lot of techniques where people say you've got to really push it and focus hard. Well, the harder you try, the farther you are away from that quiet, intuitive level. The farther you are away from the field of inner silence, which is a conscious, unified field. So we evolve in life by having a faint impulse on the level of our consciousness, and then letting go, allowing the awareness to settle to a quieter state, rather than pushing it into a more noisy state. So people can practice that to the degree that we're aware, and you start to wake up sooner and sooner.
Absolutely. There is a fear that comes up for a lot of people when we start talking about people might flow out of your, your life. The people that were serving you to this point might flow away. You might flow to new people. Your life might change. The career you had might dissolve. You might get a new career. It's like, it all sounds great in theory. But there's a sense that will come up often of, I'd rather just stick with what I got, even, good, bad, and ugly, rather than kind of venture into the unknown, even though it's theoretically better, because I don't want to lose the people I have. I don't want to lose the job I have. I don't want to. So what do you say to that thought?
All right. Well, yeah, it's like you're living in a hut and you get the opportunity to move into the castle. There's this feeling, what about my hut? I'm losing the hut. Well, first of all, you don't have to lose anyone in your life that you die. I mean, it is a choice to simply stay with the status quo. That's a choice. That's an okay choice. What people find, though, is that we're drawn to something more enticing, more beautiful, more amazing. Now, there are, again, this goes back to neuroscience. There are whole systems in their brain to draw us towards what we enjoy and like, and there are other systems to go away from things. There's the approach and avoidance system. It's sometimes said that we're always ruled by love or fear. Now that's an oversimplification, but there's some truth to it. If we focus on what we don't like, then two issues with that. One is we create that resonance and that shows up in our life. Another is if we're trying to get away from something, we may or may not end up close to what we truly desire. But when we use the approach systems, when we're going towards what we really love, then we're going in a good direction. So when we're making a practical application of that is making decisions in your life. If you feel terrible, you're probably going to be running away from something. If you feel, when you make a decision, it should be when you're feeling resonant, when you're feeling in tune with yourself. It's like people get out of a relationship that hasn't worked too well. They think, okay, I want someone who's just not at all like that. Well, you may or may not be going towards someone who's really desired. It makes much more sense. Go, okay, here's what I really like. Here's what I resonate with. And when you tune into what you truly resonate with, make life decisions and move forward in your life, following your bliss, following your joy, following what you truly like and truly enjoy, truly inspires you, then you're much more likely to move in a direction that is valuable to you. And if there's someone in your life that you'd like to continue to have in your life, you can have that person you like. You're not really losing anything. Also, people say, oh my gosh, it means the odds are lower. There are fewer people who are very highly evolved. How am I ever going to meet anybody? Well, yes, the odds are lower statistically. However, science of creating miracles, we've proven we can create highly improbable events. So all kinds of spectacularly improbable meetings will take place with amazing people that statistically it was highly improbable that you would meet, because you're able to function from a higher level. You're creating more powerful resonance on the level of your consciousness, and you're creating miracles.
Oh, I love that. It makes me want to ask you about just determinism, right? Because when you're looking at the universe on the level that you're looking at it, right? Do you feel like there's a plan, that it's all very intricately working together, that we have roles to play, that we, are on Earth to serve out a specific purpose? And if so, where's the role of free will in that? Is it, we can step on and off the path that we choose, but there is a path if we want to follow, the path the universe has for us? Or is that just complete bullshit in your opinion? I know, what do you think about any of that?
Okay, well, Erwin Schrödinger said something which I'll paraphrase. And actually, this quotation is at the beginning of my book. He said, well, how do I reconcile that the laws of nature function? The universe functions according to the laws of nature, and yet I feel free will. I feel responsibility for what I'm creating in your life. He said, well, the only logical way to bridge those two, or to have that paradox, is that I in the sense of any being that has ever said I in the highest sense of the word, am the intelligence that creates the motions of the atoms according to the laws of nature. And that's what all the great spiritual teachers have told us. The I, the self, the subject, our infinite consciousness is the same as that infinite field which we now can analyze in terms of quantum mechanics that gives rise to the physical universe. So we can create from that level. Yes, everything happens according to the laws of nature. Yes, the events will come into our lives that happen according to the intelligence of the universe, if you want to put it that way. But we are the intelligence of the universe, and our present life is creating at a more powerful level because we're at a higher level of consciousness than in the past. People might think, okay, well, my karma is going to get me. Well, yeah, but we're creating our karma right now. We're creating our lives right now. So what's most important is tuning into the reality of who we are now and creating from that level. Yes, the laws of nature function, but even in quantum mechanics. See, in the Newtonian paradigm, which served us very well in terms of getting a lot of control of the physical world, everything was determined. If you knew where all the billiard balls were on the table and how fast they were moving, what direction, you could predict infinitely in the future. Well, that's not the case in quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics, you just have, until you make the observation, you have probability distribution. So not only we aren't determined, but nature isn't determined until the conscious observation is made. And then we collapse that infinite probability into an event. And we get to choose on the level of our consciousness where in that probability distribution we're going to create, what event we're going to create, what we're going to create in our lives. So in a very real sense, yes, things happen according to the laws of nature, and those laws of nature are probabilistic in quantum mechanics. And that's the real world, not the woo-woo world. And we can choose which of those probabilities, even highly improbable things, we're going to create functioning from the level of our consciousness. So it comes down to a paradox that yes, the laws of nature have a particular path, and yes, we have free will to attune ourselves more with nature and to create whatever we desire in our life.
So it's just that it's often happening so unconsciously and so quickly that it just feels like what we expected to happen is what happens, but we are making that determination somewhere, somehow, at some level.
Yes, we're creating it. Now, that doesn't mean blame yourself when something negative happens. I mean, who knows? Maybe some long time in the past you created some resonance that's coming back to you, and it should have been a bite by a cobra, and you should have died according to what was coming towards you. But you raise your level of consciousness to the fact that you just got a bee sting. So, it's terrible, I got a bee sting. However, we are creating in the present as high a level of what the universe is doing as we can create from the present time, and that's more powerful than whatever happened in the past. So it really doesn't work to think, okay, gosh, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and I won't bother to look both ways before I step out into the street, because if it's my time, I'm going to get run down by a bus. We can be alert, we can be awake on the obvious level of not stepping out into the street without looking at the traffic, and on the consciousness level of resonating what we truly desire. Because what we resonate within is what we create in the universe. To the degree that our consciousness is powerful, the higher level of consciousness, the more improbable, the more miraculous events we can create.
It's funny because I feel like people who are religious in different ways might hear this and say, oh, are you saying that you're God or that we're God? But when you study religious texts, right, maybe the divine says, I am the great I am. But they don't say you're not.
Yeah, and they often say you are. You're in the image of God. Yeah, it's all one at one level.
Yeah. How do you, are you a religious guy, or how do you reconcile this with the general concept of religion?
Well, I think there are some concepts of religion that think of God as this, like being with a beard who's somewhere up in the clouds, thinking about whether I'm following some precepts that were written down somewhere or not, and how much of a sinner I am. That doesn't really, I think, capture the essence. The kingdom of heaven is within you. I mean, all of the great spiritual teachers have said that there is this infinite realm of life that we can consciously make contact with, and we can enliven that in our lives. And then when that gets lost, people are thinking on the level of, okay, if you believe in something, if you follow some particular book or whatever, then that's what they were talking about. But the original teachers were always talking about an experience. I mean, Father Thomas Keating was one of the high leaders in the Catholic Church. Now, I've never been involved in the Catholic Church. It's not something that's really appealed to me. But I met him when he was abbot of a Trappist monastery in Spencer, Massachusetts. And he writes books, or he passed away, but he wrote books that a lot of the very high people in the Catholic Church read about spiritual experiences. And he said to me that in the first couple hundred years of the church, it was understood the reason you live a religious life is to have direct experience of higher consciousness, direct experience of God, direct communion with the divine. And then political things happened, and it started to be thought that was too self-centered, and people were left without they stopped emphasizing experiences, and they were left with the words and the concepts and the beliefs, but without the true experience that was the essence of the church. Now, there are people in every religious tradition that realize the reality of experience that the originators of the religion, the founders of the religion, were talking about. And then there are people, I think, in many religious traditions who are much more superficial in the way they understand it. And that's okay, too. It depends on the level of consciousness that you want to radiate in.
Absolutely. So beautifully said. What's one thing for people listening, people who are feeling like they're stuck in a negative loop, like they want to create something different in their life, they want to start to create miracles in their life? What's one thing you would say to them right now?
I would say, know yourself, love yourself, and be yourself. Most of us spend most of our lives looking out there about what are we going to do. You tune into yourself. What truly resonates with you? What brings you bliss? What gives you the sense of being in tune with nature, in tune with yourself? And then from that, use that as your guide as to how you're going to move forward. That feeling of stuckness It's trying to tell you something. There's something about the way that what you're resonating, the way that you're attuning to yourself and nature that's not quite in sync. So to allow your awareness to attune to a quieter level, tune into that quiet intuitive level, what truly resonates with me. And then follow your heart, follow your consciousness, follow your bliss. And you'll find that guides you to a life that's more fulfilled.
Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. I love it. I'm going to put it on a sticky note. So I look at it every day. Dr. Larry Farwell, thank you so much for being with us. Where can people find you if they want to read your book, learn more about your work with you?
All right. My website is drlarryfarwell.com, drlarryfarwell.com. And my book, The Science of Creating Miracles, Neuroscience, Quantum Physics, and Living the Life of Your Dreams, is available everywhere. It's available on Amazon or anywhere that you can get books. It's available as a digital version as well as a hard copy version. And I'd be delighted to meet any of your viewers here who would like to pursue higher levels of consciousness further.
I love it. It's been such an honor having you on. Thank you so much for being on with us today.
Thank you. It's been a delight for me. And my best to all of your viewers.
We'll see everybody next time.